I love all things Old West, and coming here, I prepared by doing a lot of research. A great book about Tombstone is this one here, fabulously well researched. But I thought it might be fun to share some of what I found with you all. The town of Tombstone was actually founded by a guy named Ed Shefflin, who was a miner. Back in 1877, he was looking for silver. Camp Huachuca troopers told him the only rocks you're going to find out there is your tombstone. And when he actually did make his first claim, he called it Tombstone. It's crazy. A few years later, he sold his claim for $300,000 in 1880. Just imagine how money that would be by today's standards. He continued his life prospecting, ultimately died and is buried in these hills somewhere with like a marker just being how miners would mark their claims on top of where he lays. The story of the OK Corral is actually much more complex than you see in the movies. There's a variety of stories that all converge. First of all, there was this group called the Cowboys. And nowadays we think cowboys and you think, oh, romantic, whatever. Back then, cowboy was an insult because cowboys were the ones who were the thieves, were the cattle thieves. They were bad, the bad guys were the cowboys. And in the story, they are the Clantons, McLowrys, Curly Bill Brocious, and Johnny Ringo. Then on the other side was the Earps and Doc Holliday. And Wyatt and Doc were like the greatest friends ever. It's unbelievable. They made Wyatt's wife jealous. They were such dear friends. And kind of in between was this other guy who was a sheriff whose name was John Behan. He was the Cochise County Sheriff. And when he was actually running, Wyatt was going to run against him. And Wyatt said, look, let's make a deal. I'll drop out, and when you win, make me deputy sheriff. And they said, sure. And so he dropped out, the guy won, and then he wouldn't appoint Wyatt deputy sheriff. And so they became kind of not very good friends. Well, the Cowboys came to town on the morning of the OK Corral shooting, and one guy in particular was going around threatening people. He was going to kill the Earps and so forth like that. Ultimately, this guy Behan, who was the one who was the sheriff elected and didn't pick up Wyatt, he was trying to move back and forth between the Cowboys and the Earps to try to settle this out, but he couldn't do it. But he said, oh, I disarmed them all. And so when the Earps finally come in contact with the Cowboys, they see they got guns, and they were particularly upset. Virgil, who was the sheriff, was kind of saying, hold it, let's not do anything, when people were reaching for their guns. But ultimately, somebody shot a gun. 30 shots went off in 30 seconds. Virgil got shot in the leg. Morgan, his brother, got shot in the shoulder. And then ultimately, Tom and Frank Mallory were killed, and Billy Clanton was killed. The thing that ultimately happened, though, was when they went to trial, the judge was kind of like, you know, what you did was not very smart, but it was justified. And so the guys were not convicted of, like, murder. One other interesting aspect is the relationship kind of between Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday. Now, Johnny Ringo was a gunslinger, he was a cowboy. Doc Holliday was a hot-headed drunk, but it's funny that the research says he was not a good shot as compared to what you see in the movies. But they had this interesting relationship. In this book, Eldorado, which is really good, which was written by one of the deputies, it kind of portrays Doc Holliday as being afraid of Johnny Ringo. And in the movie, if you've seen the Tombstone movie, we see where Ringo is afraid of Doc Holliday, and he ultimately gets shot by Doc Holliday. But that book that I held up earlier about Tombstone has a really interesting perspective on it. There was a point where neither of them were afraid of each other. They're both tough guys. And at one point they met in the street, and they're standing across from each other. And it's like Johnny Ringo is ready for this gunfight. And that's where you get the famous line from Doc Holliday saying, I'll be your huckleberry. And all I want is 10 feet out in the street, basically. I paraphrased it. And so they're standing there, they both have their hands on their guns, and they're about to have a fight. And the thing that happens is Wyatt Earp comes over and puts his hand on Doc Holliday's arm to hold him from shooting. And then the sheriff who was appointed to replace Virgil Earp when he was armed, he comes over and puts his arm on Johnny Ringo. And so they never actually had a fight, but it's a fascinating story. And the thing that's so funny too is in the research I was doing, the whole time they're standing there, the crowds are all shouting, let him go, let him go. They wanted to see this gunfight between these two amazing guys. Thanks so much for watching this history. I hope you really enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.